My name is Eamon Foley. I am currently the IT operations manager for a company called Feralloy Corporation. I have been doing this for almost 30 years. Almost 30 years. Been working for Feralloy now for the last 5 years as the operations manager. Which basically is just a very fancy way of saying I'm Mr. Smarty Pants. Pretty accurate? Boss over there going, yeah, that's about right. Feralloy Corporation is a steel processing company. We celebrate our 70th anniversary. Put that out there. Maybe put it on all of our emails. And we are a member of the Reliance family of companies, which is one of the largest steel manufacturers in the country by about a factor of 3. I don't have any of those really cool, fancy about me pictures because, in typical fashion, I wrote this about 3 hours ago. Personal page, 15 minutes before the presentation. So, this is going to be a story about our migration from our COBOL environment to an RPG environment. Fun and joy that we've had doing it so far. This is a work in progress, which means we are still in the process of getting through this. I came up with the idea of doing this because there were a number of questions that had shown up over a period of time on the CA message board about, hey, we're going from COBOL to RPG. Has anybody ever done this before? And of course, they're just crickets. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to talk about it because this is why we did it, what we went through getting started, what we've encountered along the way, what are some things we're planning for the future, and hopefully that will encourage others to make that transition. All right, so a little bit of history of our system. Our system is called STAR. It stands for Steel Tracking and Reporting, right? So, it was first developed back in 1997 and had the very original name of STAR 97. It was based in COBOL and used DDS, which was state-of-the-art-ish at the time. And we still had a number of traditional COBOL programs, primarily allowed to reporting and some of the other features. So that's still done that way as opposed to the work rate of the print files. It's been rewritten once since then, 2008. It's given a much better name then. It's called Star 08. This was designed by using, it's basically a copy of the existing model and then sort of rebuild everything inside there. Still COBOL, still DDS, and there was still pretty good fair amount of traditional COBOL programs still lived there. Flash forward. Flash forward to today. So a couple of years ago, we started this process of moving from Star 08 to iStar because it's 2024 and everything begins with the letter I. In this, we decided if we're going to do this, we're going to modernize, at least bring it up to more modern language, one that's still being enhanced. We decided it's going to become an RPGLE. We're going to use SQL as the database underneath it. For anyone who needs to know why, I refer back to Tim's fantastic presentation earlier in the week. For all the good reasons of why we should be doing those things. So, our first real pickup, or our first real time was, where do you start on something like this? Now, you go with what's been tried and true. We'll say, hey, we're going to copy the existing model. That way, we'll have less time having to develop the work on it because, hey, most of that stuff is already done. The other really big thing is going to be easy to migrate our data over because, hey, it's the same model, the same name, the same everything, much easier to work with. And most importantly, everybody's already familiar with the looks. been in this model for years and years and years, you know where everything is, you know how to find everything, you know where all the little gotchas are. That's great. Of course, we do carry over the gotchas. So, yeah, it's good and bad. There's an alternative. You can go, well, let's just knock the house down, build a brand new house. You know, for those of you who've gone through that route, you know, well, I'm potentially talking about a longer time frame because now we're building everything again. Everything's gonna have possibly new names. Now I've got to write a whole new suite of migration to get my data from point A to point B. And that's got its own set of problems. On the other hand, I'm free. I don't have any of the baggage of the past to take with me. I can just go, this is all going to be my new, you know, take everything from beginning. It's all going to be exactly the way I want it. And we sort of bounced back and forth. What was going to be the right idea? Could we copy the model? Could we then build from that? And well, decisions of the past came back to make the choice for us. So, for those of you, I'm going to assume this is for the audience in the Zoom meeting because I'm pretty positive everybody in the room already knows this one. COBOL doesn't have a restriction on the number of characters. So it can go all the way up to 8 whole characters for a generation name. None of that piddly 4-character RPG issue. And we made full use of that. So that immediately made the decision that we couldn't use anything because, well, 8 characters pretty much wiped out every single table and about 3/4 of the leaves. So we went, okay, well, we're going to do this. We're going to have to start from scratch. We're going to build the whole thing up. We're going to do everything we can possibly do right. We're going to do, you know, between the 60, 80 odd years of experience we've got working in different shops, take every good practice you can do, and we're going to really try to make use of it. So, very first thing we came up with is we went, okay, I think we have to look at the standards manual. And so this comes to my first interactive question for people. How many of you have a standards manual? Yeah, ours. Those of you on the audience, nobody else raised their hand. So honestly, that's the first problem. You can't expect to get the most out of the tool if you're not sitting there and saying, hey, this is how you're going to do things. You can't guarantee that everyone's going to do things and make it look the same way, or name things the same way, or just in general follow directions. If you don't have somebody that says, yeah, but I told you this is what I want. In fact, nobody raised their hand, I can't ask the follow-up questions, which were, okay, if you have your standards now, do you know where it is? When's the last time you looked at it? When's the last time you updated it? Most people go, well, we wrote it once. Yeah, that was, 7.7.0. We're on 8.7.3. There's a lot of new features in it. So you want to make sure you've got that standards manual, that you've updated, that you're using it.
Specific compliance officer.
Compliance
officer?
No.
No, that's big.
Yes.
Who gets to throw the book at you if you, the rest of the partners?
Oh, I throw the book. Hey. I'm too quick. No, that's actually in.
Oh, it's in there?
Yeah. So I'll get to yours, but yeah, there is. So Mark's question that he's bugging me about is, who actually makes sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to do? And for some of the people who are in the room, or possibly listening in on the call, that we do fairly regular reviews of code, other documents that I'll get to in a moment. That has to happen, and it should be happening, because you're never going to see your own mistakes. You always have to have anybody who's ever written a paper or an email and said, could you look at this? You go, yeah, you don't want to say that. Not to this audience. So, yes, we want to do those regular reviews. Our next step was actually sitting down and looking at building our database. Like most systems that have grown over time, you go, well, I've got my tables, I've got extensions to those tables, some of those tables have another extension. And you have to start, all right, let's start combining everything back. If we're gonna do it, like I said, let's really go down and do it. Let me hear use domain fields. We even know what a domain field was supposed to be. We are strictly enforcing it, and it's actually helped us in our project, because we've had scenarios where we went, oh, we need to change this to make it bigger. And it was just change the domain and we were done. Status fields, guaranteeing our domain on a status field, because I think everybody has this one. You got a domain of a status field that's yes, no. Because you can look at it, is there are the conditions, yes, no, maybe, 7, rebuild, approved, Bob, yes. And it becomes very, very irritating. When you're looking, you're, oh, no, that's not what I want. So we went that route and said, okay, we're gonna strictly enforce this. When we got on the status fields, we went, okay, well, how many of these are really status fields? Are they really just a table masquerading as a status field? How many times did we update this status field in the last 6 months and then have to recompile every screen because it's on every screen? Let's switch them. We went, all right, we're gonna create tables. We're gonna make it easier so that it's more future-proof. I'd rather enter a record in a table. I'd rather enter a record in a table 9 different places than recompile, 40 programs. He really went down to the database to reinforce using our relations and getting all of those advantages of having the relations there to minimize, well, as everybody in my company knows, to minimize the amount of work I have to do. I'm lazy. That's why I'm using this tool. It makes it easier for me to not have to do a lot of work. It's all built in. So we did a lot more relational work. We went through the process of saying what requires this information on the table. Do we need to have audit stamps? Who last updated this table? Well, we don't really need that. Yeah, you do. Because the moment you say I don't need it, we realized, oh, if we'd have put an audit stamp, we'd have known who the last one that touched this was. Everything got. Space is kind of cheap anymore. There's really no excuse to have that information out there. Who did it? What was the program? Hey, what was the job? What day? What time? All of those kinds of things. So we went full 9 yards. The biggest one was we started making consistent naming standards. How we wanted the tables named, how we wanted the objects, which everybody thought was insane when I said, this is how we're going to do it. And now that they've been doing it for a month or two, they're comparing it to the old system, which had just a generic sort of, here, this is a display file. Well, if you've got 25 display files over one file, which one of the 25 is the image you're looking for? Suddenly, there's one person who's like, this, but you're kind of nuts when you first did it, but man, it's so much easier now. They're not in his head. So these are all things that were designed to make our life a lot easier and a lot more future-proof. And it was all planned out, we have this advantage of starting from scratch. This is a big, one huge advantage is we're able to really do that and really enforce all of this. The last thing, and this is a huge one, we created a document of abbreviations. These are the approved abbreviations you may use for a particular field. Everything had just one name. The idea being, be consistent all the way through. Everything about it, everybody's going to do it the same way. Everyone's going to use the same abbreviations, and everyone's going to have that consistent verbiage in what they do. And the other one, they talked about your jargon. Every industry has jargon. I worked at a company that was an insurance company, and we had a discussion with a whole group of executives in the room. And I said, I have a question. That thing that we sell, you go in, you get it's a piece of paper. What's the name of that piece of paper? And these were the heads of every department. These guys combined had about 300 years of experience. I got 8 different answers for what we call that one piece of paper. And I go, that's fundamentally a problem. You've got to have the same name, because if somebody else comes in, you all want to be using the same jargon, the same lingo. That became, especially with that, became our abbreviation style. Hey, we're not gonna use number, it'll be, you're gonna call it, you have to abbreviate this word, you're gonna abbreviate it this way. Out of that became, this is how we want all the screens to be laid out. This is how everything is gonna look. So to help enforce that, we even went so far as to use templates. I'm not gonna go too in depth in this because I know somebody has it in part of their life. So I'm not gonna go too deep into this, but if you haven't done it, stick around for the lightning talk. But we built a lot of work into our templates. There were a lot of consistent code, and it became much easier for us. We started cranking out, most people would say, well, I got 5 or 6, maintenance programs over a table built in a day. We were probably doing what, twice that? You're doing 10, 12 programs a day over 2, 3, 4 developers. Suddenly you're going, well, now we're cranking out 40 or so programs a day. Yeah, they're maintenance, but when we've got 350 of them to build, you've gone and suddenly done it 3 weeks instead of 3 months. Or 3 years if you were doing it by hand. So, again, this all came back from we're gonna do it the best, and we're gonna make and maximize our use of the tool. Now, the most hated part of my recommendation of how we do things, and I mean hated. How many people here can think that they can sit down and write a program spec for somebody else to do? Who doesn't work with me? Yeah, program specs. So this has been a hard topic. It's not something most people really do. You're 1 or 2 people, especially if you're a 1 or 2 person shop. Why do you need a program spec? I'm the one writing it. I don't need to write a spec for me. Or there's 2 or 3, well, everybody's been there for years and years and years, and everybody knows what they need to do to write it. Well, that's great, but we have the fortune of having consultants in who are able to do some of that lifting for us, which means they don't have business knowledge. We've got to give it to them. What we discovered is writing a business spec is really hard. Writing a program spec, I should say, is really difficult to do. So it's an unused muscle. We had some advantages because, of course, you still have the live model, because you always want to have something to fall back on. Just in case the first one doesn't work, still got the old one there. So they got the entire history of everything we did. And I tried to emphasize, when you're writing a spec, your audience, first off, is going to be, another developer. And then you want to be looking at, well, what do I put in there? I don't necessarily put in there the actual code. I'm not putting in there how they're supposed to do something. I'm paying them a lot of money. I don't need to tell them how to do something. They already know that. I need to tell them what. And it's much harder than it sounds to sit there and say, I want to list out, this is what it needs to do. Your program spec is going to be more than just the developer's going to use it. Now you're going to be able to take that, this is what this was supposed to do. I'm going to hand that off to my testers. And now they're going to start writing test cases based on what the program is supposed to do. Not how. And it became, a tough road for us, because was a lot of, what do I really need to include? Should I include this code or not include that? You include the things that people need to know what it's supposed to do. There's a difference between copying a block of code, putting it right into a spec, and saying, here's a formula force calculation, say, what the hundredweight based on square footage is supposed to be. Here's a complicated calculation. There's your law, as opposed to, here's the compute. X1 equals. That's the difference. And writing that spec is a really big thing. And it's really good because you know what? As you move to other places or as you're going beyond this, those specs become really important. Because you're then able to then have your users be able to give you, this is what I wanted to do. And you can flesh that out. And they can read it and understand, now I know what it is. It's supposed to be happening when I'm working. Now the part Mark was sleeping over there, it's waiting for me. I'm joking, yes. Document and code reviews. So the first thing you need to do is you need to say, okay, we looked at and said, okay, we're gonna review the files. Developer writes somebody else entirely is gonna review the specs. Are they following our methodology for how we want our business specs, how we want our programming specs to look? They include all the information they need to have in there. Are they written in a way so that if we hand them to someone who doesn't know business, but understands the code, and they still write? And it's good, and that took a lot of time to work that process out. And our spec compliance officer back there has, enough paper cuts to prove it. But we did go through and do this, and it really does help. Because part of what that's designed to do is it's helping us understand what that old code used to do and how we're able to then translate that to something. So we're only taking what we need from it. And we're gonna leave the rest of that baggage behind. And 15 years of baggage, there's a lot. The other thing, and this is probably the single most important thing and something that almost nobody does, are code reviews. So, and maybe it's me, my definition of a code review is I'm not looking at, does your code satisfy our business? There's a tester and plenty of other people who are going to make sure it works the way it's supposed to do. I'm looking at this to go, do you follow our standards for coding? Did you do things in a consistent manner, the way we want to do them? We've got a half a dozen programmers in our teams. We're pretty lucky. But anybody who's ever looked at their code from 6 months ago and got, what was I thinking when I wrote this? Or why did I use, what is magic number? You know, there's where code reviews come in. They're not looking for, did you follow what the spec said? No, they're looking, did you follow our standard? Did you use Word? Do you have code in 6 different, do you have something weird in someplace odd? Did you forget to put a comment in about why this is here? All of these are things to make that consistency so that when you go look at somebody else's program, hey, I've done it in advance. I know exactly where this code should be. I'm not looking and saying, well, I'm in this user point and then in this user point, but I'm testing here and here. Why do we have to do it in 2 places? And is that why I'm getting a different message? Those are some of the things that we've been learning as time goes on, and it's just a good practice. You know, sign on to let you do pretty much anything you want, anywhere you want to do it. But it isn't necessarily always the best practice. Like I said, our goal was to try to make as many right decisions at the beginning as we could follow. Some of our future plans. Yeah, it's going a lot faster than I thought, but hey, I was expecting a bigger crowd. Some things that we have planned for our future. We're replacing all of our traditional reporting with Excel. We're taking this, you know, as our opportunity to eliminate everything. Again, a best practice, you're cleaning house. You should be going, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and say, we're not gonna give you any reports. Here's all the reporting we've had. We're not giving you any of it unless you could put somebody's ownership behind it and say, what is it you're using it for? If you can't describe it, we're not making it. It's a good practice. Forces the users to actually acknowledge what they're using. And you'll find, we found maybe a third of the initial review was, what is this report? No, it's not being redone, don't worry about it. You know, these are some of those, more of those future plans. We're gonna be making use of sign-on's trigger process. Not quite the way it's built, but we'll be using it nonetheless. Some of it for controlling trigger processing and audit stamping, and some of it, for some future plans we have that I'm not yet ready to explain. Because I still haven't quite figured it all out. We have a number of external systems that interface with us. We're gonna replace all that with, instead of their willy-nilly ODBC connections and them getting the ability to just come in and take data whenever they want, which is kind of messy and I don't like it, so they don't get to do it anymore. We're gonna go ahead and say, hey, we're gonna replace these with APIs. Gives us the advantage of having much greater control over what they're accessing and when. And it minimizes our impact to them when we're making a change. Anybody who's ever had to interface with an external system where you didn't have total control over how they got in, and you went, well, we're changing this. Well, you have to wait. We don't have time to make that fix. No, I'm gonna give you an API, you'll call that, you don't have to worry about it. Don't worry about what happens behind the scenes. We're making sausage and logs back here. You don't need to know. Some of the lessons we've learned so far. Standards really do matter. Whether it be how you're naming stuff, where you're doing stuff, where you're putting your code, how you're making your screens look. All of that really matters. We have currently a hodgepodge of some screens are 24/80, some are 32/127. So you've got that jumping back. You've got some screens that are laid out. Well, we laid it out this way. We abbreviated some things that way. Why did you pick this function key to do something? All of those are things that really came into play for us. So we found that these standards really do matter. As I said, though very painful, these program specs have actually been useful, I'm hoping. I know for at least our consultants, there's no way they would have been able to build any of these screens without those ahead of time. I think some of my compatriots would probably like to have me strung up, just for even suggesting that. But I'm bigger than most of them, so I'm okay. But they really do help. Our testers are going to be looking forward to this because they're going to be able to start writing test scripts and test plans for having to test an entire system. Having those program specs ahead of time and make their job a lot simpler. They'll have something, they'll know what it is they're looking to do. And that's really the whole point of this, some of this paperwork is it's there to tell you what you're supposed to be doing. And yeah, this is probably the biggest thing, review OR. We have program reviews and code reviews are going on constantly on new developments. Documents are reviewed, programs are reviewed. We have weekly meetings in which one person brings up about 47 topics. But I'm not at all going to point out who it is, but he's not wearing the hat. We do these reviews and they're really good because not everybody is involved in every aspect of things, but everybody's got something they bring to the table. And these reviews have done a fantastic job of introducing some people to brand new ideas and new concepts. And in other cases where we've found a lot earlier in the process, where we were going off the rails, how we got back on track, which is, really worked well for us because we're pretty much doing everything else not the way you want to do it. We're still doing new development in the old system. Don't have a choice. It's still a live system. We're still having the subject matter expert pulled off on other problems. So these reviews help keep everybody as a part of the project, help keep everybody moving forward. So as painful and difficult as those reviews might be, they are well worth the time and effort it takes to get them in there. That's kind of it. We're a quiet group and almost everybody here is a senior level or up in the room, so I don't get as much, they didn't get as much, tickling. Yeah, I really did expect him showing in to heckle me. He usually heckles me at least once.
Oh, I did, because it's all relevant. The thing is, I've had someone with a COBOL model, who 25 years ago, I wanted to convert it to RPG. One thing stopped it, 8 characters.
Yeah.
And not only that, the model was created in 1991 by Nokia, this company called it. And it was porting the WAN COBOL solution onto the ASP.NET, I mean, it is on. And the majority of the code was migrating COBOL code. And the same as your experience, there was a hell of a lot of execute programs there. And then what they did with print files was ridiculous because when they couldn't get the print file to do what they did, well, they execute user source. That's manipulating the process completely with execute user source with print file. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So there's heaps of execute user source and execute user programs written in COBOL, which would need to be migrated.
We have that, and we're going to be addressing that exact problem, which is the bulk of almost all of the recording is 99.9%. Yeah, I think there are like 4 different files, 7 a month.
And the rest straight just multiple query.
Yeah, queries for straight COBOL print files.
Yeah.
And and that's why I said, our goal is to say, one, anything that is a report, let's do it in Excel. We can do it natively in Excel and sign on. We don't need anything else. Anybody want to go back 2 or 3 conferences? You should find my one that's presentation on that. But you can't go forward with those things. You can't maintain them.
Even things that people don't think about, like report routing.
Yeah.
All getting redone.
Yeah. But our report routing right now is based on each profile.
Yeah.
They actually just take the outview and write our outview profile. It's great, except we have people who work in 9 different divisions. And stuff, they're explicitly in different places, so it doesn't work.
There's a whole concept of report distribution. You've got
Yeah.
to build a report distribution system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you do.
Or at least you can build into a file system. I did that in my previous
Yeah,
job too.
and that's exactly it. I mean,
And this is how, why the school filing, we're using that one. Trying to YFS. It's just the YFS.
That's another,
Then you work on it, file PDF, you know, page one series.
yeah, we've got tools we've got a tool that they use today for doing that outside of the sign up. But,
Doesn't handle barcode very well, but it's all there's create print, shows the existing.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, like everybody else, you've got a tool that does it.
Yeah.
What is it?
And typically on the tool.
Well, I mean, clearly, he came up with that, not me. I don't do that one, always him. Yeah. But yeah, that is it. You've got those little things, and it's decisions in the past. In its own way, that being forced to rebuild the model from scratch was probably the biggest blessing we could have asked for.
But in a way, what you've done is, and I always tell this to tell this to customers, yes, we'll migrate what we've got. That problem is most of the models more than 35 years old, probably close to 40 years old. Because the problem you've got is that all that crap you've got to migrate as well.
Yeah,
Whereas what you should be doing is using the existing system as a prototype. And say it's a prototype when a bit.
That's
yes,
That's what you look at as a prototype. Is it gives you ideas and you say, well, we tried that, that didn't work very well, we carried it forward. There's so much carried forward. Let's redesign that bit and we'll keep this. That's the whole concept of prototype.
yeah. And as Brad said, that's exactly where we're going. This is, we got probably 75 to 80% of what the old system does. It does the way we want it to do. It really does work. And so we know that part of it has to be here. But there are so many workarounds and so many, you know, this was done here, this was done here, and then there's this weird bit over here that's going off this way. And you're left with, and at some point,
Well, the system becomes muddy.
Yeah.
Convoluted. After you have it for some reason.
not everybody, not everybody lives up to their own internal view of how good they are at coding. So, I'm gonna be clear, there are plenty of things I've written that I look back at, and go, no, we can go ahead and take my name off that, that's all right. I don't associate with that. So I can be just as guilty of it as the next person. So having, like I said, having that decision made for us that we had to restart was great. Because, like I said, and really trying to go, what would be as close to ideal as possible. We sit there and talk about having to normalize the database and say, well, hey, you know, those of us that have had database classes and you get to fifth, and apparently now there's a sixth normal form.
2.5, please.
2.5 is exactly, my database teachers told me that years ago. They're like, this is the ideal. This is where you want to get to. This is what is considered the acceptable ideal at about 3. You can get 2.5. You're in the sweet spot.
Yeah.
I worked with a guy who
You're being optimal.
I worked with a guy who made a 4th normal form database, and the very first thing they said after it got up, it was running, and they used it for a month, they went, can we make this work any faster?
It's not very efficient.
Yes, it's not very efficient. Well, of course not, because it's writing the 65 tables every time I write one record. I got 4 fields over here, 8 fields over there, 2 over there, 1 over there. And we went through all of that and we were doing our database. We said, okay, what do we want to keep? What do we want to get rid of? What do we want to expand upon? What makes sense? What new things can we introduce? How do we make this work better? Well, the main things, the going in and actually having everything do references, which of course, during our conversation as to what that led to for us. But it happens. But you know, as my guys all know, I'm a lazy programmer. I want to do as little work as possible. The tool's going to give me all this stuff for free. If I don't have to code for a select statement, a select record, great. I don't have to code for it. I said, here's my select record. I had to build that no matter what. I don't have to write any more code. I'm happy. You know, we have a couple of other quirks that go with it. We have a GUI presentation layer sits on top. We have the Presto product from Fresh sits on top of it. For certain aspects and certain users, they have to use, so they don't have a keyboard. So they have to have a touch screen. It's not for everything, but again, because you're enforcing a set of standards on design and how everything's gonna look, makes using those products even easier. Web 2E, you know, Mark knows, we put together like, would be probably the best download ever of Web 2E. And you wouldn't have believed that it was a web, you wouldn't have believed that it was a sign up when you look at it. You know, but that only worked because the model had enforced how everything was going to look, how everything was going to be laid out, how everything was going to work. That's where all that power of the tool is really coming. And while it seems like you're taking more time at the beginning, You know, you want to do continuous integration, you want to do continuous development, continuous testing, you're constantly moving that way. That works fantastic for every aspect of sign-on development except for one. Actually, this, I personally think it carries over to every development tool. But you can't be refactoring your database every iteration. Not if you want to, because you're constantly, that backlog is just gonna get bigger, because every, well, I changed this table, well, now I've expanded all this. Invest all that time in the beginning, get that database solid and stable, and you could just start cranking stuff out. You know, it took us a while to get traction when we first started, but, you know, today, they'll crank out screens, you know, like I said, they did 300+ screens in the time most people would be like, I can't believe you guys did that much work. When it's just, everyone looks the same, operates the same, code is where, code do certain things that are consistent all throughout your company. Hey, all the code for option key processing is always the same user code. We know where it's always gonna be. It's not, some of them are here and some of them are up here. Function keys are always in this spot, they're not down over, they're not where sign up is. I'm sorry, that's a pet peeve, I hate that user requirement, it's the worst name. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. So.
Yeah. But it's just interesting that well, what you've said is just the approach you took. It's the approach I took to building a banking system for ANZ Bank in New Zealand, which is crossed by Australia and New Zealand. It's a banking organisation. Is that I was only with the organisation for 7 months. I came in as a chief architect. This was in 1989. 1990, middle of 1990, I disappeared going China. And in that 7 months, we built a whole banking system because we had 100 standards, everyone was claiming standards, and then we used templates, they all back there, first come out. And we rolled the whole system out in 6 months. And because of that approach, the exact same approach you've taken now.
Yeah.
That was designed and
And the biggest thing about it is, it isn't so much that it's gonna be that, it's everything you're doing now is building towards maintaining this and enhancing it in the future. Because you know everything is going to be consistent in the way it's going to work, everybody's going to have it. Everybody will have their own little stamp on how they do something, and everything will be consistent all the way across. And that's going to pay off dividends over the next 10 years that this system is going to be running.
And that's evident in this banking system, is the customer tried 3 times to get rid of the AS, but we're going to write this on another platform, but wouldn't do it cheaply. And having a ton of product, they kept it. I was back at that organisation, I was working for IBM a couple of years ago as an IBM systems engineer to work on the upgrade to active mirroring. And what happened was, oh look, there's my old library still there. Oh, these items still working there. Wow, so I said, I can still use it. This is, yeah, we couldn't get rid of it, it's still got it. Yeah, I remember I bought this in 1989, last time I saw it was 1990, there it was, 2 years ago, I get to see it, it's still there. It was, yeah, went up.
I heard, a few years ago, and so far, it's been a minimum true. A typical migration of an IBM application to a new platform, that's an application to a new platform, is 5 to 7 years. If
Everything goes right.
if you have everything going right, and if you have that business knowledge of the old systems available. I left the company after 10 years. And 9 of those years they were migrating the core financial app to the cloud. And when I left, they had done a grand total of about 15% of it had been migrated. They spent tens of millions of dollars. And we're no closer, and still had to have the existing app, we're no closer. I just heard, now this is 18 years later, and they were just now shutting off the old application. It took them 18 years, and at least 2 C-level executives and an entire middle management team to pull it off.
Well, I'm working with another company.
And one comes World Series with it.
Yeah.
I was working with another company where they've just spent the last 2.5 years developing a solution. 2.5 years developing a solution they developed using an Indian development team, a Pakistani testing team, a New Zealand architecture team, an Australian AS400 support team, and all those. Well, they had like 50 people trying to develop this application over 2.5 years, and it didn't deliver what they wanted. And they've come to me, they're gonna do the second version for another part of the business. And they asked me this, can you speak up and say, we want to work out what's gonna cost us, I had a look at what they wanted to deliver from a business requirements point of view. And I put it together, and I showed them, we're gonna have to do all of this, and I took the time period right at the back, and how long it was actually gonna take. And they said, oh, that looks complex, and I said, probably it'll take about 9 weeks. And it'll be 2.5 people. They said, what? We just, 2 years with 50 people to deliver the other.
Yeah.
But again,
It's the, if you don't have the right approach, you waste time. The biggest expense you have, anyway.
yes. Well, that goes back, that's what I said, it's, you look at the program specs, you look at the standards, you look at enforcing all that. You look at getting that core database, everything built on, once you have that, you can then just start cranking stuff out. You know, we're at a point where we can't write the specs fast enough,
Yeah,
which, you know, all things considered, is a good place
it's a
to be.
good place to be, really good place to be, because it can be time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.